Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to the first alumni panel of this trimester. So today we're focusing on careers in education and teaching. And the aim of this event is to really give you a good idea of the range of options that are available to graduates from arts and humanities and social sciences and law. So my name's Sarah Brown. I'm the Career and Skills Consultant for the College of Social Sciences and Law. I'll be facilitating today's event with my colleague Michelle Cohen, who's the consultant for Arts and Humanities. So today we're delighted to be joined by Siobhan Dalton and Ruth Concannon. They're going to share their career journeys. They'll provide you insights into their current roles, their past roles. They'll give you some tips into recruitment processes, and they're going to reflect back on their time at UCD as well. So just to give you a little bit of background, Siobhan is a deputy principal and teacher at Piper's Hill College. She completed her undergraduate at NUIG. She studied history and English, and she did her PME at UCD in 2014. And Ruth, she is an educational assistant at the National Library of Ireland. She studied at UCD. She did her undergrad also in English and history, and she did her master's in Anglo-Irish literature and drama. So you're both very welcome. We really appreciate you joining us today and sharing your career stories and just giving your time to us and to the students. So thanks very much. So just for those of you who might not have attended one of these events before, just to give you a sense of what we'll be doing, I'll be asking questions, but we will be pausing and giving chance for everybody to ask questions at different points right throughout the event. And then we'll be having a Q&A at the end as well. So please feel free to ask any questions. Ruth and Siobhan, they're the experts within this field. So, you know, anything that you want to know, anything that kind of springs to mind that you'd like to find out about that's going to help you with your career decision making, with any kind of tips for the recruitment process, anything at all, just feel free to put your questions in the Q&A box, and Michelle's going to be checking that throughout, and we'll be able to get all your questions answered there. And also just to let you know, at the very end of the session, we will be popping a short evaluation of just a few questions into the chat box there, and sharing a couple of links with some other kind of upcoming events to do with teaching and education. Okay, so that's all the intros. So I think we'll kick off. So I think it'd be really interesting for everyone to hear a little bit more about your educational backgrounds. So I think maybe Siobhan, if we go to you first, you did your undergrad at NUIG and then you came to UCD to study the PME. So maybe if you could tell us what it is that made you decide that you wanted to go into teaching. So basically, why did you decide that the PME was right for you?
Yeah, hi, thanks everyone. So I originally picked arts to do in Galway because I wasn't sure if I wanted to do psychology, and it was one of the only arts courses that let you do psychology in first year, and then you could specialise if you wanted to. So I did psychology, English, history and sociology and politics. And after a year, I kind of realized psychology wasn't the thing for me. I thought it was too statistical and there was a lot of, you know, it was very sciencey. So I went in to do English and history then. And I suppose the reason I went into teaching, I hadn't actually planned to go into teaching. It hadn't been kind of on my radar. But I went for it. It was a year course back then, whereas I know now it's the 2-year course. And after the year course, I kind of knew it was the thing for me. So it was pretty easy, but it hadn't been my intention on doing teaching when I did the degree.
Okay. And what did you, I suppose part of was it the HDIP that we were doing?
The postgraduate diploma in education, yeah.
Yeah, so I suppose part of that would have been going out on placement during the course. So could you maybe tell us a little bit about how you found that experience? Because I suppose that the first kind of initial time that you went out on placement must have been an interesting experience for you.
Yeah, God, it was so long ago now. It was like 13 years ago. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, so I did it down in Cork actually, and the school, the way it worked for us was you went in every morning for your placement to the school, and then you'd lectures in the afternoon. So it was a small school in Passage West. There was 250 students, and it was a deaf school, meaning a disadvantaged school. So it got a lot more resources. So it was a kind of real learning curve for me. Like you definitely get more when you go in to do the teaching, you definitely get more experience being in the classroom than through lectures. I mean, you can attend lectures, you can read all the information, you can know how you're supposed to act when you go into a class, but it's really actually when you're in the classroom and like having the connections and relationships that you kind of learn. So it's a really steep learning curve, but it was brilliant. And I suppose if you are going that route kind of and you are looking for placement in different schools, try to get a variety of schools. You know, if you go to 2 or 3, try, you know, a co-ed school, try you know, community school, maybe an ETB, you know, mix it up so you get experience of different places.
Very good advice. And had you had much experience, like did you do much voluntary work or kind of other work before you started on the programme?
No, like I went straight into my teaching straight after Galway, straight after my degree. I kind of knew I wanted to get a qualification straight away. I didn't want to take the year out. I was worried that I wouldn't get back into it. So like when I did do my like advice as well is, you know, volunteer for whatever you're interested in. Like when you go into a school, there's so many different opportunities. If you're into sport, you know, sign up to help coach a team. If you're into music, there's musicals or drama. You know, there's loads of different clubs going on in school, and you know, teachers are always looking for volunteers. And that's definitely advice that I would give to anyone who's going into school new for the first time. As soon as you can, you know, for the social side and to get to know people, sign up for something. I remember the first job that I got, there was a musical starting in the school, you know, that month. So I straight away just signed up to help backstage, and it really kind of helps you to kind of fit in and get to know people.
And had you got involved in like extracurriculars when you were a student, like drama societies and things to kind of help you have those kind of interests and things for when you were at school?
As in when I was in college?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would have signed up for like a drama society, law society, attended talks. You know, in the first year I would have signed up for GAA and, you know, been involved, just try to experiment and see kind of what I was interested in. The history society as well. Yeah,
so a nice broad range of kind of interests there.
Yeah.
Very good. And I suppose another question that I had, what is it that prompted you to do your PME at UCD?
Now, I did my postgraduate for teaching was in UCC in Cork, and then I was teaching for about 3 or 4 years when I decided to go back and do my master's in UCD.
Okay. Oh, very good. Okay. Perfect.
Yeah. So I did the part-time master's in education in UCD, which was over 2 years. So you could do it as 1 year full-time or 2 years part-time. So I chose UCD because I know when you go in to do your master's in education, when you're teaching, there's a leadership version and then there's a general education version. And I went with general education because I wasn't just interested in leadership. I was interested in kind of curriculum and teaching and learning and kind of just, you know, what goes on in the classroom.
Yeah.
And I thought the UCD course was for that. It was very broad.
Okay. That must have been quite a juggle, working and doing the course at the same time.
Yeah, so it was 2 evenings a week, and then it was great. One opportunity I had was to go to Spain during a summer. It was like a mini, I'd never done an Erasmus or anything, so there was a 4-week course where you could go and work with other universities, 6 other universities in the EU, and look at how their education system worked. And it was called Leadership for Democratic Citizenship. So it was all about how we should, you know, no matter what subject you teach in post-primary, how you can encourage citizenship and encourage learner voice and in your schools. That was really good.
Sounds like a really good opportunity. Thank you. Okay, Ruth, I think we'll come over to you, give you a break for a minute, Siobhan, there. So Siobhan, you also studied English and history for your undergrad. and then you did your master's at UCD as well. So do you want to kind of talk through what it is that prompted you to choose those particular subjects, and why you kind of chose the route to go down that you did kind of educationally?
Yeah, I suppose when I started off with my undergrad, I wasn't too sure coming out of school kind of what I wanted to pursue. So I thought it was best to start off broad. And I did originally start as English and German joint BA, but then I changed to history. I realized halfway through first year that the gap between German in secondary school and in college was very vast, and I decided to switch to joint major with history. So I suppose after my undergrad, I kind of was coming out of college. It was 2014. There was still a lot of kind of issues with the recession and things like that, or it's 2013, sorry, even. And I wasn't really too sure where I wanted to go. I knew that I enjoyed kind of sharing information and learning and things like that, and working with people, but I didn't think that I wanted to go down the route of primary or secondary school teaching. So I actually thought I wanted to initially go into academia. And that was why I did my master's in Anglo-Irish literature and drama. So at the time, so at the time it was a 1-year course. So you worked through the summer on your dissertation. So it was kind of like all the way through 2013 to 2014. And by the time I got to the end of it, I suppose not giving myself the gap between the undergrad and the master's, and your final year is quite tiring and exhausting. I was really tired, and I decided I wasn't sure if academia was something for me, and I wanted to take some time out and kind of work and think about things and where I would go next. But I did think that education was something that I would come back to. After that, I did.
And what kind of what gave you your kind of idea? So you were originally thinking about academia, and then you thought, actually, no, let's kind of move away from that particular path at that point of time. And you've always been interested in education and learning and these kind of things. So what kind of gave you or shaped your ideas of the direction that you did take?
I suppose I've always kind of worked with people all through my undergrad and everything. I would have worked in retail, and so I always would have had kind of a role that involves working with the public, and I knew that I enjoyed that. So after I finished up with my master's, I worked for 2 years in Charlie Byrne's bookshop in Galway. I was the children's section manager there. And from that, I actually got a job with Dublin City Public Libraries as a reader in residence. So this was a programme to encourage reading with children in the northeast inner city primary schools in DEIS schools. And that really kind of also cemented my kind of love of sharing information. I was encouraging them to kind of read for pleasure, to come in and use the library facilities. I really enjoyed kind of communicating ideas and things to people. And even at the end of working in that role, I was kind of thinking, should I go back and do primary school teaching? But I decided not to. I think because it was the 2 years and I would have to take time off work, I decided it wasn't feasible for me. And I suppose then I worked in a couple of other roles before I came to the National Library. And in this role, I am kind of working with communicating kind of what NLI has to offer in terms of our archive and our resources, and communicating those ideas to people and also to primary and secondary school students as well. So it's a different spin on education.
Yeah, so it really has all kind of come together. That's really interesting. I might just pause for a moment because I do want to give opportunities for questions if anyone has them. Are there any questions at this point, Michelle?
Not so far, Sarah.
Okay.
I'm keeping an eye on.
Very good. I didn't want to get carried away and just carry on talking.
Actually, some person now that we're talking has put in. So maybe that was the cue they're waiting for.
Yeah.
So one person has just asked. Sorry. So what makes a teacher great, as in, I suppose, that maybe extra stand out? And what are the difficulties or challenges associated with being a teacher? So maybe
Siobhan first.
Siobhan first.
Yeah.
God, what makes a teacher great? Tough one. I think it's a lot about your relationships and communication skills. Like we have, it's content before, or it's not content, it's connection before content, Maslow before Bloom. And I think a lot of schools, or any jobs out there for teachers, it's about your relationships with the students, how you interact, and obviously knowing your curriculum and knowing your subject, but it's more about that's what it is. It's relationships, and there's no kind of black or white in how you interact, but it's like respect and kind of building. I keep saying relationships, but that's the most important thing, I suppose.
And do you think that that's something that you get kind of taught on the program, or is that something that naturally someone would need to feel that they have that ability to kind of build rapport and kind of be very focused on people?
No, it's not necessarily natural. I think you can learn it, and I think it's a skill. I think, like, from my own experience of teaching practice, like, I don't think that was taught enough. I don't think there was as much of an emphasis on that as it should be. I'm not really sure how it is now, but say something that's really big in schools nowadays, and in our school, like, we look at restorative practice, and it's all about if there's issues with the students or whatever's going on, that you don't blame, you ask what happened, and there's very like set questions that you ask, and to try and move forward. If a student's not working with you, it's you're not going to punish a student into doing work for you. It's all about how you can kind of check in with them, and it's all like, you're talking about extracurricular. If you know what a student's into, maybe asking questions, kind of trying to and it takes time to build that kind of relationship. And I think young teachers kind of come out and think that they can't smile for the first 6 months they're in the job, or they have to it's the letter of the law, and that there's a certain amount of flexibility. But it's not natural. I think it's something that you can learn and practice. It's a skill.
Yeah, Sarah, there's a few more questions. Just, I think since you prompted, you prompted people to. So, is it tough to get into the PME in the first place? So somebody has mentioned that they heard it's very competitive. So I don't know. Maybe Siobhan, if you've heard about that, and maybe a question for Ruth as well, is just on becoming, like, or both of you, confident in your own abilities. I suppose someone is just talking about, like, starting off in your career and maybe how to become a little bit more confident.
I can just answer on the PME and whether it's competitive. I'm not 100% sure, but I would say, like, it depends on the subjects, I would say. I think at the moment there's a real need for teachers. So I think it's a good time to be going into it now more than ever. They're looking for, like, we're always looking for teachers in our school, and I know around the country there's actually a shortage. So I don't think over the next year or two that there'd be hugely difficult to get into the program.
And is that in any particular subject areas, or is that kind of across the board?
Different subjects, like Irish, home ec would be math, like, there'd be a lot of need maths as well. But there's so many new schools and so many new jobs kind of coming up, have been for the past 2 years, and I know will continue like that for at least the next 2 or 3 years. So it's a good time to be getting into the course, and I would say you're like guaranteed a job at the end of it over the next couple of years anyway.
Well, that sounds good. And Ruth, I think the question was how you built kind of confidence in the workplace and kind of professionally. So I don't know, maybe if you want to think about any tips or like what you did to build your confidence through time.
I suppose, unfortunately, practice does makes perfect, and the more experiences you get, the more you work and the more you throw yourself out of your comfort zone, the more you will learn to be kind of comfortable and confident and to kind of rely on yourself. I would say 100% you should sit down and have a proper think about what your strengths are, and like, so this is like totally separate to what your work experience might be, or what your academic strengths might be. Look and see, maybe you're good with people, maybe you're good with kind of like admin tasks. Maybe you've got really good attention to detail. So sit down and actually think about that, what it is that you are really strong on, and then work towards those strengths. So think about that when you're applying for jobs, you know, is this going to work towards my strengths or against them? Because don't put yourself in a position where you're in a role that is going to make you feel uncomfortable. You know, say for example, I'm terrible at maths, very, very bad. I would never put myself in a situation where there's going to be a lot of kind of statistics or financial things, because it would just make me uncomfortable. So play to your strengths is kind of how you increase your confidence, but I'm by no means an expert there.
And have you, Ruth, have you found that you've had many kind of opportunities in terms of like on the job training or like professional development since you've started your career?
Yeah, National Library is fantastic for that, and especially because we're in this time where, you know, we're open in a virtual sense but not in a physical sense. So we've done lots of training in kind of, you know, child protection and web, online, and you know, actually filming and recording and presentation skills and stuff like that. So NLI has been very, very supportive in kind of furthering our skills and also looking after our kind of mental health as well too at this time when we're working from home. But you do notice it, like the more places that you're involved in. For example, as well as that, I would be involved with Children's Books Ireland. This is an internship I did when I came out of college, actually out of my master's. I did an internship with Children's Books Ireland. I'm still involved with them, and they would be excellent as well too for bringing up opportunities for training and improving your skills. And if you do have opportunities for that, you should try your best to do them, because it's brilliant to get the opportunity to kind of improve your skills wherever you can.
Very good. And that's interesting to hear that your kind of first step was to do an internship when you left university, because yeah, that's often a really good stepping stone for people, and it's good to hear that you're kind of still involved with the organization.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
I had a very positive experience, and the women at Children's Books Ireland are great friends and mentors of mine as well too. I think that like it was useful because it gave kind of a practical element that I didn't get in my master's or my undergrad, to kind of look at what areas could I work at in overall in the kind of book world or in the literary world. And but I would just say to everybody to kind of be careful with internships. You know, I still worked while I was doing my internship because it was unpaid. So just be mindful to not that you're getting something out of it and that you're not being kind of taken advantage of. But I was very, very lucky with mine. I can't say enough good things about it.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. And I think sometimes having a kind of time parameter, so saying I'm going to do this unpaid for a certain period of time, but kind of putting a time frame on it for then being able to progress. And did you approach Children's Book Ireland directly, or had you seen it advertised somewhere, or how did you actually secure that internship?
So I did my thesis for my master's on Irish children's historical fiction. And I suppose Children's Books Ireland are kind of the best place to go if you are interested in Irish children's books, or if the Irish children's book world. So they kept coming up whenever I was doing my research, and I decided to approach them. Yeah, I approached them directly and asked them if I could intern with them. So I'm not sure if they're doing internship programs now, because they are unfortunately out of their offices too at the minute. But yeah, it was a good thing to do, and I definitely learned a lot from it.
Fantastic, good advice there. Might go back to Siobhan to find out about your first teaching role when you'd completed your teacher training.
Yeah, my first role, what I did was apply for as many jobs as I could. So I sent my CV out everywhere pretty much. And I was just really lucky that a school in Naas, which is where I'm from, contacted me one morning. It was like a Monday morning, and asked the principal, could I come in that afternoon? That as a teacher had unexpectedly, could I come in for an informal chat? So I went in and literally started working the next morning, and kind of thrown in the deep end there. So initially it was actually teaching EAL. So it was back in 2008, 2009, and there were a lot of students in the school who didn't have much English. I think a lot of students had come from abroad, So it was to try and blitz them for EAL and get their English up to speed so they could access the curriculum. I don't think that's as big an issue now, but back then it was that was a major thing, that a lot of students just didn't have the English proficiency. So there was a lot more EAL happening in secondary schools. And then from there, I took on English and history hours. And built it up from there. But basically anything they asked me to do, like there's CSPE as well, and SPHE, and there's other subjects you can teach as well as your degree subjects, I suppose.
So you have to be quite flexible at the beginning when you're trying to kind of build up your kind of repertoire, I guess, and your experience and your contacts and your reputation.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely flexible and kind of open to subbing as well, and kind of being available. And nowadays, like, you have your degree subjects. So say I had English and history, but like I said, you could be asked to, you know, would you be interested in teaching SPHE, or there's short courses now. I mean, there's courses, you know, for junior cycle in philosophy, coding. You can create your own short course. So anything you're interested in, you could propose. And there's a lot of focus on well-being and life skills. So yeah, it's not just your subjects. You can kind of, you know, teach anything really.
Very good. And then did you, from that particular school, have you moved into another school, or are you in the same school, or what's kind of happened since?
Yeah, I am actually in the same school. So like anything, I didn't expect to be there for longer than 6 months, and then it turned into a year, and then 2 years, and I'm just really comfortable, and it was a really good fit for me to the school. Like I said, it was a co-ed, we actually went from 300 students and 25 teachers to a new building and built up to 1,000 students, and 90 teachers are there currently. So getting to go through that whole process and moving from, you know, one school to another school was really good. And then I suppose after 4 years teaching, that's when I decided to go back and do the masters, you know, because I felt like I was getting the hang of teaching, and I felt ready to kind of go back into education. So that's how I went there.
Very good. And so you're deputy principal within the school. So would you be able to tell me a little bit about what's kind of involved in that kind of those responsibilities?
Yeah, it's funny because it's completely different from teaching. I think it's one of the few things where you can go into that role without having the training or without having the experience of it first. It's not like in other jobs, you know, you're going from teaching to a completely different job where you're kind of leading and managing and all that goes along with that. So in our school, we've 3 deputy principals and the principal. And so we divide the role. I work with seniors, you know, with 5th and 6th year. So a lot of work around actually preparing. I work very closely with the guidance team, and at the moment, you know, they're getting their CAO. So the whole idea of where they want to go for college next year, that's kind of a big part of my job. Huge part that I wouldn't have thought of before, but like almost like counseling skills and mental health. And, you know, a lot of the work is checking in with students. And like I said, relationships are massive there. Curriculum development, kind of deciding what courses we're going to offer, what subjects. We'd have a lot of additional educational needs as well in our school. So, you know, we'd have a lot of work there, and pastoral care, and like every day's completely different kind of.
And what would you say is kind of, I guess, the most challenging and the most enjoyable aspects of your role?
The most challenging, I would say, is that there's no kind of black and white, here's what you do when this happens. Like, it's very gray area, and it's all about, you know, making judgments and kind of looking at different angles, and, you know, different people wanting different things, like students, parents, staff, you know, and trying to balance the needs of everyone. That's the challenging kind of thing. You know, there's no manual of here's what you do with. And it's the same with teaching. Like, you know, you can know how to teach and then go in on the first day, and, you know, you have to wing it and figure things out as you go along. But that's also the exciting bit. So like, I'd go in with a to-do list for the day, and then first class, you know, a student might come with an issue, and that could be the next hour talking, you know, to them. And yeah, that's exciting. So it's a mix of kind of long-term planning and
Mhm.
you know, meetings, and then kind of dealing with the everyday things and all the things that get thrown at you every day. And working with different teams as well is great, you know, like, and
yeah,
so many different teams that go on in a school.
very good. So it links back to the whole kind of needing to be flexible, being able to think on your feet, and all that kind of managing evolving situations.
Yeah, exactly. Like this remote working from home.
Thank you. Thanks very much. That was a great insight there. I think Ruth, maybe I'll come back to you. It'd just be interesting to hear a little bit more about your role as an educational assistant in the National Library of Ireland, like what it involves, what you're doing, maybe before the pandemic and how it's changed now that we're all kind of remote working, and then maybe as well the same kind of question, like what's the most kind of enjoyable aspects and other kind of things that might be a little bit challenging within your role.
Perfect. Yeah. So I suppose a bit about the National Library itself, because I think sometimes people are a bit confused about what it is that the easiest way to look at it is that the National Library is kind of the print memory of Ireland. So whereas you'd go to the National Archives to find out about your genealogy or your history, and you can still do that with the National Library to a certain extent as well, we kind of collect and preserve records of life in Ireland, and then we make them accessible to the public through our exhibitions and our learning programming. So we do this, we have got like print collections, manuscript collections, ephemera, which is my favorite. It's like posters and flyers and everyday things, magazines, that kind of thing. We've got periodicals, we've got photographic collections, and it's growing all the time to kind of reflect life in Ireland. So say we've got the Irish Queer Archive now, which reflects kind of LGBTI plus life in Ireland down through the years. Then we would have also, say we've got material from the Together for Yes campaign during the Repeal the Eight. So lots of kind of stuff that's modern Ireland goes into the National Library. So I work as an education assistant, and I'm part of the exhibitions learning and programming department. So we would kind of program and design exhibitions based off of our collection, and we also develop learning programs that kind of are thematically based off of these. And then we also have like a program of events. So say we've got talks, workshops, panel discussions, that kind of thing. So with my job, I kind of work specifically more so in the learning part of that. At the minute, I'm working kind of mainly on the primary and secondary school programming. So this will be different talks and workshops for, I kind of work mainly 5th and 6th class and transition year students. So those two groups. But not specifically, I mean, I could do any age. And it's kind of like how we would communicate our collection to make it interesting for children and students of that age, and how we can get them interested in what we have to offer as well. And I also work on hosting kind of our online tours as well. So we have 3 at the minute. One is kind of the life and poetry of W.B. Yeats. Then we have World War Ireland, which is Ireland during the First World War. And then we have Turmoil to Truce, which is about the war for independence. So if you are an art student and you're studying history, have a look at the website, because there's loads of things on offer, and please learn from my mistakes, because I didn't know about it when I was an undergrad. I suppose what I really kind of love is, you know, I love the programming and the development side of things. I love coming up with kind of different tours and workshop ideas, and how this could be, how we could use this part of our collection and make it kind of interesting towards somebody who's 11 years old. How do you make this grab their attention and stick in their minds? I really love kind of, you know, communicating what we have to offer and showing it to people, so that it's not just left in an archive somewhere far away that nobody remembers anymore. Yeah, so that's kind of the main side of things. Like I do actually use a lot of the things from my arts degree. Like there's a lot of research, critical thinking, kind of analysis involved, and I definitely would, like, your own creative interpretation is really important, which is something I would have got from my undergrad. So yeah, it's all kind of built around that, I think.
Very good. Lots of useful transferable skills. So that's
yeah.
yeah. And on what kind of aspect? So it sounds like your role is very creative, and you think outside the box and all these kind of things. So that sounds like obviously really enjoyable. You sound really passionate about it. What kind of would you say are the main challenges that you kind of encounter within your role, or even just kind of within the kind of sector more broadly?
I suppose kind of the big challenge for me is that I actually started this job during the pandemic. So I started remotely. I have been on site a couple of times, but just to put it in context, there is 13 people in my department and I have met 2 of them in real life. So everybody else exists to me as a box on Zoom. So that's challenging. It's hard to start remote. It's hard also, obviously we used to do real life events, real life programming, and now we're kind of having to backpedal and translate these into an online way. So all of the talks that we do would have normally been exhibitions in real life, and we've had to translate that into an online format. So I suppose even kind of thinking forward, when I'm designing a program or a workshop for a school, I have to think, could we do this in real life, and how would we do it in real life? If we're doing it on Zoom, what kind of things do I need to consider? If there's an activity involved, the teacher is not going to be able to move from the top of the classroom. They can't move from their pods, all of this kind of extra things. So the knowledge I have of actually being in a classroom does help, even though I haven't been in a classroom since the pandemic started. So it's kind of like having to always be flexible and adapt your ideas is challenging, but I do kind of enjoy thinking outside of the box, so it's not too challenging. But it has been, I've got a great welcome, I have to say. My team have been very supportive for my remote start, but it is strange starting a new job from your home office or your bedroom.
Definitely. And I'm just thinking, like, lots of the students that are kind of joined us today, they might actually be starting a new job kind of remotely, perhaps in summer. Have you got any kind of tips for anyone that does start a new job or an internship or some kind of role remotely? What would you say kind of key tips are from your perspective?
I suppose do try to kind of reach out to your colleagues, and they should probably be very understanding. I'm sure I've had that experience anyway, but do try to reach out to them socially and speak to them and get to know them on another basis as well. Don't be afraid to ask questions, even though it's more hassle to email or call somebody than to just shout across the office at them. Do not be afraid to ask questions. And also, just kind of for your own sake, I would say, make sure you set up kind of like, in as much as you can based on your living space, a dedicated kind of workspace. Do try to like get fully dressed every day, just so you feel that you're in work mode and there's a small separation between your life in your home and your life working in your home.
Very good. Some really useful tips there. I'm just thinking, Michelle, is there any kind of questions that have come up in the chat box?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah.
Very good.
So there's a mixture of questions for Ruth and Siobhan, some about the PME, but Ruth, maybe just while you're on screen now at the moment, just did you see your job advertised like through Grad Ireland, or was it through National Library itself, or what? Because there's quite a bit of interest in jobs outside of teaching. So
So I actually saw my job advertised through Twitter. So I follow NLI on Twitter, and they had tweeted about their jobs. They had advertised it through their website and other means as well, but that's how I saw it. So I would say if you're interested in working in a place, definitely follow them on Twitter, because you would find that's where they advertise them. Other good places to look are the Arts Council website. Have a look, if you're looking for kind of creative jobs that aren't teaching, obviously, have a look on Creative Careers is really good. Website as well too, and there's museum jobs as well too. If you Google that, you should get the website as well to come up. But like, keep an eye on, if you want to work in education in kind of museums, galleries, those kind of spaces, follow the place and keep a good eye, because they'll be up and then they'll be gone. So,
okay, very good. And
thank you.
Does your role ever involve you delivering like outside of the library? Like, would you ever be going to schools, or are you always based or when you return, will you be based in the National Library?
There'd be a little bit of that, but mostly schools would come into the library. So we're based in Kildare Street. We also have the Seamus Heaney exhibition in the Bank of Ireland space and the National Photographic Museum or Archive as well too. So they would normally come to us. But so that's why this has actually been a good opportunity, because we can reach schools that are maybe down the country and can't come up to Dublin as frequently. So there's an opportunity in everything.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. That's super. Siobhan, there's a question just about people are interested in, I suppose, was it hard to work your way up towards being a deputy principal from when you started teaching? Like, do you find that difficult, and kind of maybe what would you recommend if somebody would like to move into those type of roles?
I think it used to be seniority in schools. Okay. Where it used to be, you know, for posts, we have like AP2 posts and then an AP1 post, and then you go deputy principal, and that was kind of the old system. And then they've changed that now that it's all competency based and seniority doesn't come into it. So there's a lot of opportunities around at the moment. So after, I suppose, my master's, I would have taught for another few years, and then we have an adult school as part of our campus as well. So I applied for the job of Director of Adult Education there, and I got that job. So that meant I was teaching part-time, and then I was, I suppose, the principal of the adult education sector school. So we had about 400 students, and we had about 100 courses. So I learned a lot from that. It was kind of coordinating, putting on courses, you know, you had a team of tutors, it was like running a school, a night school, kind of separate to the day school. And then after that, like a huge number, I don't know what it is, I think a lot of people were retiring, you know, and people are moving, like there's a lot more movement around in terms of job positions and deputy principal positions, leadership roles. And so the opportunity came up and I applied for the job. And like with teaching jobs now, it's competency based. So it means that they're not going to ask you what you intend to do. They'll ask you your experience to date. So they'll ask you kind of, you know, what's been your experience? Give an example of when you showed leadership skills. So it's all about kind of you applying what you've done and then showing how you have that skill. If that makes sense. And it's the same for if you go for a teaching job now, it's competency based. So they'll ask you about what you have done to date and how that might show that you'd be good in the position.
Okay.
Very good. Good advice.
That's very useful. If we have time, Sarah, there's just one more. I think it's particular. So Siobhan, you may or may not be able to answer this. So a student has just asked, their long-term plan is to complete a research master's and a PhD, and they want to work in academia, but she wanted to double check, is it possible to teach part-time in a secondary school, or even to sub-teach while studying then in the future for a postgrad? So basically she's about to finish a BA in arts and English and film. So is it possible to sub or teach part-time while doing it? Yeah.
It's a good question. It used not be, but because of the pandemic and COVID, like say this year we have people in subbing with just their degree, and they can get a teaching council number. It's like an emergency teaching council number, and then we can bring them into the school. Up until that, you had to be a qualified teacher, but they've changed that. So I imagine it'll be like that for the next couple of years.
Brilliant. Okay, that's really good. Ruth, you shared great tips for working from home, actually, which would be really helpful, and certainly for the who would be possibly looking at that in the future. Siobhan, are you finding it challenging at the minute working virtually and building relationships with students? So one person has asked that. And also to you both, very helpful advice.
Yeah, definitely. So it's challenging, but we put a lot of plans in place before we went back to remote learning in January. So we got a team together, a digital learning team, and a number of teachers worked really hard on putting together a blended learning handbook and scenarios, and training teachers up on Zoom and how to run live lessons. And we prepared timetables in advance if we had to go back to remote learning, what it would look like. So it's actually been pretty seamless this time around compared to March. We were all just like, Google Classroom, we were still trying to figure out. But a huge amount, it's like anything, like you can put CPD and like, you know, you can recommend people train up on things, but like until you're actually thrown into that position, you know, you're not going to maybe find that training. But like a huge difference this time around. And Zoom has been fantastic. So we have staff meetings, check-ins, and all the students are engaging much better. We have a whole system in place of students not engaging, that there's, you know, the tutors, the year heads, the guidance team, the counselors. We kind of, you know, home in on students maybe that we're worried will disengage. So it hasn't been too bad this time around.
Great, perfect. Thanks, Siobhan. Okay, back to you, Sarah.
Thanks very much. I suppose I was thinking that it might be useful to kind of think about recruitment processes a bit more, because I know that sometimes students find it quite daunting thinking about submitting applications and going through interviews. So I suppose maybe Siobhan, have you got any tips for students that are applying for jobs? What would you be looking for from someone that's submitting their application to you? And do you have any kind of tips for the interview process as well?
Yeah, like a big thing is ETB, like there's a lot of ETB schools. So my school is an ETB school, and we advertise on our own hire lab system. So just make sure that, you know, look at the ETB jobs as well, because they're not advertised through the usual channels. So there's a lot of teaching positions there which new PMEs might not be fully aware of. And in terms of the application process and the interview, like I said, it's competency based now. So you know, your questions would be around your curriculum knowledge, would be around your professional knowledge. So things like mixed ability and differentiation in the classroom, how would you cater for all learners? Well-being is massive. So outside your subjects, how could you promote well-being with students? Your values are important as well, and kind of what are your, you know, how do you show that you work well in a team? Like teamwork is massive, and your ability to collaborate and work with others. And then for applying for particular schools, just know the values of that school. So you know, look up their website and, you know, investigate and see what type of school they are, what do they value most, what do they promote, what, you know the school quite well when you go into.
And would you normally, within your school, would it be kind of one round of interviews, or would it normally be kind of like 2 interviews, or what's the kind of process look like itself?
It's usually 1 round. So say we'll be advertising for jobs now in the next couple of weeks through our hire lab. So we put the jobs out, and they submit their application, and then we'll have the interviews. And let's say it's a maths job, so you'd interview the 10 prospective candidates that day, and they'd be it's a marking system, competency-based marking system. So it's 1 interview, and then you'd find out. They'd be paneled, so it'd be first, second, third, fourth panel. So even if you didn't get that job, actually that's an important point. If you didn't get that maths job for that school, you could be paneled, which means any other school in that ETB could hire you, then could take you from that panel.
Very good. Yeah, well, that sounds positive. Would you kind of do you get many candidates ask you for feedback after the interview process?
Yeah,
that's useful, isn't it?
Yeah, so say if you've 3 or 4 on the interview panel, each person would be assigned a few candidates who could then phone and get feedback afterwards.
Very good, perfect. And Ruth, I don't know if you have any tips about how, you know, you went about getting your current role. So it sounds like when did you start in your current role? I know you said it's during the pandemic.
Yes, not too long ago. So just kind of last autumn. So it's still relatively new. I suppose what I would say is, you know, I think Siobhan raises some really good points there about collaboration, and about it's the same for, you know, organizations, museums or galleries. As Siobhan said, you should know their values and know the place that you're going to work for. I'd also say, like, kind of any kind of work experience that you can get, and I know it's a bit tougher now, but like a lot of kind of festivals and places that you might normally volunteer at or get work experience at or intern are actually online. So like they're being translated into an online format, and they might still be looking for people to help with that. So try to get as much kind of experience to build out your CV as possible. I'd also say actually take a day and sit down and learn how to use kind of Google and Google Suite and Microsoft Word and Office, and don't just put it on your CV and not know how to do it. Just, you can Google everything these days and find out how to sit down and use them, and it's useful to have those on your CV to actually be competent in them. And I'd say, as I mentioned, I did find my job through Twitter. Use your social media for good. Use it as networking. Find out more about the places that you want to work and the communities in which you want to work in. So use it for practical reasons too.
Very good.
I agree with Ruth there about the Twitter. Just when you mentioned that for teaching as well, Twitter is invaluable. Like even if you're not going to participate, even set up an account and follow all of the educational bodies, and for CPD, for job opportunities, it's just brilliant.
Very good advice there. And I think at the minute, like we were saying, like things are in a way kind of obviously challenging, but it kind of does make certain things more accessible. So, you know, you can log into certain webinars that are taking place in different places that you might not be able to access. So I think there are kind of certain things that we can tap into and try and make the most out of the current situation. Okay, we've got a few minutes left. So we are finishing at 5:02. So I'm just thinking we'll have a look and see if there's any more questions in the chat. I'll just have a look through here and see if there's any more that are coming in. What's this?
So sorry, Sarah, I'll just pop in the evaluation link. So
perfect.
I think the last few questions have been answered just around where to get jobs, and I've posted links in the chat about the career events you mentioned.
Yeah, very good. There's a couple of career kind of events coming up to do with teaching. I'm just having a look here. What's this? There's one, I don't know if we've answered this. What are some of the behind the scene jobs that are involved in teaching that perhaps wouldn't be so well known outside of a teaching role? So are there any other kind of roles maybe within your organizations that people might be interested in but they're not aware of? Ruth or Siobhan?
There's lots of roles at the National Library that don't necessarily involve kind of like education. There's like HR, there's finance, there's lots of kind of archival work, and NLI actually do offer studentships as well too. So if it is something that you're interested in, especially for kind of history and English students, have a little look on their website, and there's some options there that might be interesting to you.
Very good. Very good. And Siobhan, is there any kind of other roles that people might not be aware of that you could kind of mention within your teams?
Yeah, I mean, outside of teaching your subjects, there's a lot of different teams you can be involved in. Like I mentioned, the digital team, the restorative practice team. We talk about building relationships, all the different clubs that are involved. Like we do a lot about learner voice, student council, leadership, like, you know, developing leadership amongst students. And then outside of the school, you could work with the NCCA or the PDST. They kind of offer CPD professional development opportunities for teachers. So there's a lot of teachers who are seconded, and they either work part-time training other teachers and doing webinars and things like this, or they could, you know, take a year out and be doing that as well. So, you know, there's a lot of other opportunities.
Very good. Perfect. Okay. Michelle, is there any other questions there, or does that kind of cover everyone's questions?
I think that probably covers pretty much everything. I suppose just by the time we've wrapped up, I'll just conscious of time.
Yeah. Fantastic. I just wanted to
yeah, I think we're good.
Perfect. We've got 1 minute to spare. We've done it well. So yeah, so thank you so much, Ruth and Siobhan, for sharing your insights there. I think by the level of kind of engagement and questions and things on the chat, that I think it's been a very valuable session. So this is being recorded. So you know, once it's kind of been edited, it will be available to you on YouTube. So you know, have a look. Michelle's put the evaluations in the chat, so please take a moment. I think there's 3 questions. And do have a look at those upcoming events as well, because there's lots of opportunities there. So thank you very much. Thank you.